Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob, Space Trucker, Chapter 19, written by Regal Legal. The link to the original will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Cast leader Cleroy was stressed. His green hydrating mucus was grey. His shell was cracked in a few places, and if the juveniles weren't so similarly troubled, he'd fear that they might try and devour him in his sleep and take his place. The matriarch had been bearing over them so much that he could swear that he felt her standing over him even now. They were scouring every intel source that they had, hidden cameras, listening devices, informants, and even bar rumors. Cleroy was confident that the matriarch would crack him open and suck out his insides should he fail to have some information with his next report. His eyes scanned over the documents that were being brought into the control room by the juveniles, and they each had their own stack to pore over. Then he saw it. His claw tapped on the data slate. This. Who brought this one in? He quickly flagged the report, and one of the juveniles skittered forward. When and where? Phyllis complained about the Cultural Dance Center. 2 Phyllis squads entered the illegal black market station run by the Banktiers to compete with some sort of regional dance competition. 1 squad won, but a pair of unknown species stole the trophy. They submitted a complaint, hoping that we might track them down. They were off duty, but on an illegal station competing in an unregistered event. I thought that we would reprimand them for wasting our time, but you said bring in all the reports regarding unknown species. Yes, but when did this get reported? 1 standard sleep cycle ago, cast leader. Cleroy chittered out and quickly input the coordinates into his console. The station wasn't too far from an FTL lane, which was normal. He quickly traced a path between the station and the others that they had staked out, only to find that the prey had escaped. They had been heading towards the core. They travelled away from the core for a while, but were now starting to veer inwards. Very cunning of them, but now we had a route. Cleroy pulled the map back and the coordinates, travelling core-walled along the FTL lanes, searching for some sort of target or point that he thought would be the next stop. Then his eyes widened for a moment and he smacked the console with his claw. Here, we'll focus all our regional hunter-killers here. The juveniles clustered around and then looked at him in confusion. Cast leader, a museum. Cleroy hissed and clicked at the juveniles, quickly skittering away before he cut one of them open. Yes, the terrorist diplomat will strike there. It has an exhibit on the regulation wars. This is the start of a new war. They'll spark it with their treachery. There is no doubt that she'll want to attack it with her new bloodthirsty mercenary. Cleroy moved with purpose, scurrying the communications terminal. He shoved the juvenile out of the way and was typing on the console with his forelimbs. We need to send out a warning to the museum security. They must be on alert for the Libertonian. Should we have them close the museum? No. In fact... His claws paused at the console. Never mind, we won't warn them. He began to type once more. We'll instruct all hunter-killers in the area to converge as we move there ourselves. We should make it in another cycle. We'll wait for them to strike and then capture them. Should I wake cast leader B-Robbo? No, his quest for revenge is driving him blue. He's like a gleamer chaser who's wandered out into the deep for too long. This has to be done efficiently. We need to capture the Libertonian, and either capture or kill Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Emily had been able to relax a bit more after nearly killing Billy Bob, which had been about as traumatic for her as it was for him, even though he kept making fun of her over it. That was just how he dealt with almost dying, it seemed. But as they drove along the FTL lane, his navcom pinged with info in the upcoming system. Mostly they ignored it now, since they didn't need the standard refueling stations. But as she read it over, she noticed one of the attractions and gasped out. Billy Bob, we have to stop up ahead. He jerked a bit, looking up and around for a moment at the traffic. What? Oh, sorry, not like in FTL lane, I mean in the system. Why, what's up? There's a museum up ahead with a collection of art that I've always wanted to see. They have paintings and sculptures and smell vistas and all sorts of things. The hell is a smellvista? And there is no way I'm going to a museum about xeno art. Count me out. You need to get some culture that isn't human. Besides, you promised if I let you compete in the dance tournament that you'd do what I wanted in the next system. Billy Bob opened and then closed his mouth a few times before shutting it firmly and thinking back on what he'd said. God damn it, I didn't mean a museum. I meant like something that I also wanted to do, but it was your idea. She just stared at him from the co-pilot seat, and he groaned for a good 30 seconds while looking at the roof of his cabin. Fine. Ugh. She let out a happy chirp and held up one hand. He looked her over, confused for a moment, before realizing what she wanted. I'm not giving you a high five. What? Yes, you are. Museums are high five worthy. No, they're not, except for maybe a video game or a war museum. I'm sure they've got war stuff here. It's a big place. Yeah, but you want to see some smell vistas and other stuff. She looked at him, hand still in the air. Billy Bob, I'm not going to do it. Yes, you are, she said with a force that growled at him. He groaned out and raised his hand, and she quickly snapped and giggled in excitement. This is so much fun. I've always wanted to go here. Don't worry about it. What could go wrong in a museum? I'll get so bored I'll kill myself, he said grumpily before she started punching his shoulder. Shut up. You're going to enjoy it. I just know it. Okay. Geez, stop it already. He leaned away from the punching with a laugh. You're a lot more active now that you tried to murder me. I think my blood energized you. Ugh, that's disgusting. It's just because now I know that I can totally take you in a fight. Bring it on, hollow bones. I'm not an earthbird. My bones aren't hollow. You should be careful, or I might take my gloves off. He chuckled at her as she wiggled her forearms at him. Now that he thought about it, he'd never seen more than her face and wings. That cloak, survival suit thing covered her body. Either they didn't need to bathe much, or it also helped clean her feathers. He should really learn more about the species at some point. He shrugged it off and began to downspin his engines to move through the FTL lane, to get to the exit of the system near the museum that she wanted to see. Unlike normal stops, he had to actually start weaving through regular Xeno traffic on his way to the planet. Most of the Atlas cargo ships were heading to a different port, so he was mostly moving around smaller vessels, carrying tourists and private yachts owned by wealthy families. These Xenos seemed to favor curving, asymmetrical shapes for their ships, as opposed to Billy Bob's blocky and very efficient Longhorn. He didn't care about the Xeno designs. They were all form, no function. They were wasteful on materials and, in general, looked ready to snap in any decent gravity. In fact, now that he thought about it, it was like being in an actual ship flying into some anime. The next thing you'd see was a bunch of giant mech swords fighting when none of the soldiers knew how to lead the target. Then he thought back to his fight on the station. Perhaps no Xeno soldiers did know how to lead the target. He shrugged it off as he focused on finding the designated lanes leading down towards the correct spaceport. What's the species here like? He asked as he glanced over at Emily. Oh, this is a Polvanian planet, one of the founding species of the galactic government. Wealthy, high-class, high society standing. They make up the majority of bureaucrats in the galactic government by a large percent. They're fairly weak physically, but very culturally adept. Around the same height as an average Libertonian, so taller than me by a few inches. They're sticklers for rules and order aside from art, of course. You're shorter than the average Libertonian. You didn't know that. He stared at her for a moment before she realized why. Right, I'm the only Libertonian you've ever met. Well, I am, but only by a few inches, so it's not that bad. I'm not like a dwarf flyer. What's that? Sounds pretty cool. They're just like Libertonians who are only around 5.5 feet tall. Genetic disorder, they're very nimble flyers, so they were able to survive in our pre-civilized period. We have dwarfs too. They survived because we like laughing at them. Wow, I just realized what dicks we can be as a species. Then he shrugged it off. There was a chime as they were hailed by the traffic control. Unidentified cargo hauler, you're entering the wrong spaceport traffic lane. This is for tourists and private vehicle traffic. That's a 410 there, good buddy. There is a private transport with a pilot and a co-pilot only. You must have switched wires somewhere. Our designation is... He began making noises with his mouth that sounded like some sort of garbled transmission. Please hold your heading while we, verify. Billy Bob grinned at Emily. Damn ground control, I've got an exotic newly discovered animal for the museum. The curator is expecting us down there as fast as we can fall out of the sky. You're really gonna hold me up because your tech is busted. You get to sit in a nice comfy while I get chewed out for one of your mistakes. I don't need that crap today. I want your control number. The curator craps on me and I'll make sure he craps on you too. See how you like it when important people breathe down your neck. You're clear for the private museum dock. Say flying. Thank you. That wasn't so hard now, was it? Tell you what, if things go well, I'll let him know that you helped. You have a nice day now. Billy Bob ended the transmission and chuckled. God, Xenos are so easy to fool. So few actually want to deal with an angry space trucker with a delivery. Emily was smiling as he pulled out the main spaceport lane and followed directions now being displayed on his window. The planet beneath them seemed so full of greens and whites. The cities were very densely packed, as usual with most Xeno settlements that he'd seen. They liked to have really huge cities on the developed worlds. Most of their colonies were home clusters together, with the fields stretching out around them. They very rarely liked to live far apart from one another. He brought his longhorn down into the designated docking area behind the museum. The structures themselves were massive works of white stone, but to him they looked more like a mold colony, stretching and bobbing out in weird ways. Very organic, with almost no right angles or symmetry to the structure, which, like the ships that looked like it would fall apart in Earth's gravity. He didn't like it. There was only a few small yachts back here, no cargo haulers like his. He could see what had to be a Polvanian with a data slate walking towards him. He had an important decision to make here as he tapped his chin. Deep in thought, Space Poodle. That was it. That had a fluffy furry section along with their long lanky bodies. No tail, but a pointed nose and curved up, and already stuck him as a being stuck up as snobs. They were mostly humanoid, pointy face, long neck with a lanky body and arms. Their torso almost looked too small for their height. This one had blue tufts of tightly curled fur on his head, midsection and in two different spots on both arms and legs, the feet ending in a tall three-toed feet. The rest of it was covered in a yellowish-greyish fabric that looked sort of like a jumpsuit with holes in it for the fur to stick through. He looked over Emily. Okay, follow my lead and act aloof. They exited the ship, and he waved to the wait near the entrance. She crossed both of her sets of arms as he approached the Polvanian. No, this simply won't do. Where's the welcoming committee? I don't see the flowers or the carpet, or any of it. The museum employee halted and whacked and looked confused. Pardon? You can't be the only person they sent to welcome her. It's just unacceptable. I need to talk to whoever's in charge of these things. She can't be subjected to such a basic treatment. The Polvanian looked down at the data slate and spoke again. I thought that you were a cargo hauler. What? This? A cargo hauler? I'll have you know that this is the latest fashion in luxury from the outer systems. It's not about how it looks, but what it carries. He nodded slowly and then pointed at the Polvanian. What's your name? I'm going to have to make it very clear to the curator that you're being very unhelpful in welcoming our newest artist. Bring in enough work for a new wing, and they don't even know who you made it. Wait, who are you talking about? You don't even know. It's Princess Cinnabuns of the newly discovered Artsy Fartsies. The Galactic Council is fast-tracking their membership due to their art and culture advancements. Why do you think they're here in an outer system ship? And she has me as a servant. Have you ever seen my kind before? No? And here I am in a ship that you've never seen before in your private dock for a museum. You think we came here by accident? I I think there's just been a mix-up. I wasn't told any of this. I'm sorry. Oh, I see. Blaming someone else, are you? Yes. Oh, Billy Bob walked back to Emily and then very quietly said, I'm just going to pretend that we're discussing something. Look agitated, or as much as you can with that mask on. Emily huffed, sticking her head in the air as she moved her hands again in an animated fashion. Is this really going to work? And then he nodded and walked back to the Bolvanian, slowly unwrapping an arm around it to pull it away from Emily. The princess isn't happy, but I think that I can make her see the opportunity here. If no one knows we're here, we can just look at the layout on our own before people know who we are. Why don't you just give us 2 all-access passes and I'll calm her down. You don't talk about her arrival to anyone, and we'll walk through. And then I'll call up to make sure that they have a welcoming committee waiting for her in a cycle or 2. Okay? The Bolvanian shook its head in a circle-like pattern as the translator told him that was the same as nodding. Yes, here. It quickly tapped the data slate and pulled 2 little black pebbles out of his pocket, handing them to Billy Bob. Please let the princess know that we didn't intend insulting her. We're thrilled to have her art here at the museum. Please enjoy yourselves. Those are VIP passes, and the exhibit as long as you like. Billy Bob nodded slowly and gave the creature a very light pat. I appreciate it. Remember, don't tell anyone, or I'm going to have a very different story for your superiors. Of course. Absolute secrecy. Billy Bob smiled and walked back to Emily as the staffer scurried away. He handed her a pebble. Well, I doubt I'll like it, but at least it was fun getting into the place. She laughed at that and walked along with them as they were herded through the private docking area, following the signs towards the main museum. It was set up as a series of indoor and outdoor exhibits, with opulent-looking gardens separating the large white buildings. Emily began to guide Billy Bob through the various gardens and exhibits, much like she said there were sculptures, art, and smell vistas. It turned out that smell vistas were clumps of scented materials in front of pictures of places to try and give a sense of being someplace else. Some were okay, but he insisted that some smelled like an unspecific Xeno rear end. UXA, he actually liked the gardens best so far. Looking at Xeno modern art was rather underwhelming to him, and it was hard to appreciate the craftsmanship of the sculptures when he didn't know what the frick any of them were supposed to be. As they wandered through the gardens, he pointed to a section where the Greslin was an exosuit that had stood next to the display marked exotic and dangerous. The Phyllis were wandering over towards one of the plants, looking sort of stoned and mesmerized. The Greslin sprayed something into his face as he shook it off and quickly walked away. See those plants with the fangs? Venus flytraps, they're from Earth. They lure flies in and then snap shut around them and eat them. What? You have a plant that eats meat? More than one, I'm fairly sure. It's a death world, after all. That's terrifying and interesting at the same time. And terrifying? I said with a nod. Then he pointed to the tree in the glass dome. I forgot the name, but that's a totally toxic tree. Looks nice, kills anyone who sleeps under it. Emily couldn't believe Earth had so many plants that would harm creatures. Plants! And that didn't include the ones that were simple poison. In fact, the majority of exotic and dangerous plants were from Earth. From what Billy Bob was telling her, they didn't even have all the real dangerous plants that he could think of. But there had to be at least 5. How could a planet house more than 5 dangerous plants? Billy Bob laughed when she asked that, and caused a bit of a scene with the Xeno stared at him. The way he laughed in that loud, boisterous manner was somewhat intimidating to the more peaceful species. It sounded menacing and predatory to the mostly herbivore species. They were moving on when they found the exhibit of pre-FTL species. He gasped and he pointed at a picture that was guiding the people to the exhibit. That's the Voyager! That's the Voyager! They found it! We went back to try and track it down with our jump drives, but never could locate it. They must have taken it during all that spying on our music. Well, it's unlikely that the Bengtiers were involved in taking anything besides information. They listen to radio signals and watch species to see if they'll likely be good trade partners. It's illegal, of course, since the government doesn't want to risk early contact, but it's pretty easy to steal radio signals and the like without getting caught. Well, whatever, it's the Voyager. He dragged her along, pointing and marveling at some of the artifacts that they had from various young species. But when they came to the section on humans, he got really interested. His translator was playing the recorded message that would broadcast as he touched the various exhibits. This is Earth, a supergravity death world with incredible levels of water. Many dangerous plants from this planet can be found in this exotic and dangerous plant exhibit outside. At the time, most artifacts we found on the planet rests in the perpetual state of war. The species inhabiting it is brutish and simple-minded. He laughed. Two great clans competing over control over a little land there is. They usually use missiles filled with uranium, plutonium, and hydrogen arranged in such a way as to split the atom, and an uncontrolled fashion which leads to massive radioactive explosions. The species is not expected to last more than 20 solar cycles. He laughed again. In accordance with standard galactic surveys, we have taken pictures of the society once every 50 solar cycles, up until the first launch of an object into space. After that, we surveyed once more, collected these artifacts and left them in isolation. We plan on returning in 100 solar cycles to collect more artifacts from the radioactive remains of the decaying ruins. They either forgot to do that, or were disappointed when we aren't dead and pretend we are. He said with a laugh and then pointed. These pictures are from old Earth. He began to look at the pictures of sailing ships and towns that had been taken. This has to be like the 1600s. They aren't close enough to really make out specifics, but still. He ran down the long corridor, looking at the pictures before stopping. Emily! She caught up with him, looking at the grey, scented landscape, some sort of metal and foil contraption in the background, with the red and white blue flag in front of it. The caption said below, landing site of the first human moon mission. Then he gasped as he saw the sign pointing towards artifacts. The first one said, first human object in space. Sputnik! How did they manage that? The exhibit was fairly empty, so he didn't have to worry about disturbing anyone. As he walked into the large room, he gasped. No fricking way! Emily stepped into and looked around at some sort of pointed rocket with him. On the one side there was some sort of red field with a white circle and some strange black squiggle in it. The Nazis did beat everyone to space. Everyone figured there was no way. This is huge. Wait, but do I want to tell anyone? They were dicks. He looked at the remains that they found in the ship, the dead pilot, black uniform, and black pressure suit that had failed. Some sort of gun. An MP-44 and ammo. Why the frick did he have that in space? Was he expecting to shoot space monsters? Oh, a real Luger. He was pressed against the glass as he looked. Who are the Nazis? They were a bunch of non-Americans who hated Jews and gays and gypsies and everyone who wasn't exactly like them. They were total dicks, but they were really good engineers and fighters. They were sort of like those enemies you really, really hate, but kind of respect because they are so freaking tough. Like Russians, but beer and engineering instead of vodka and general drunkenness. Did you guys ever have anyone like that? Oh, we're sort of that for the rest of the galaxy. Really? Well, don't genocide people, do you? What? No, not at all. We just believe in less regulation. I still don't get why there is a war over that. Then he finally walked down away from it in the voyage that he'd first spotted it in the picture of. This was the first thing that we made that made it out of the system. He started reading what they knew about it and discovered something. They didn't find the record. How could they not? Jesus, that means it's still in there. He was pressed against the glass as well, staring at the Voyager. It's right there, Emily, the golden record. He looked around and tapped on the glass. Think this has got an alarm? Yes, I think that it's got an alarm. This isn't over. I'm going to make them give me that record. That's part of human history. It doesn't belong in a museum. Billy Bob, you can't just demand one of the museum pieces. Yes, I can. The lazy fricks didn't even look into the Voyager and find it. He walked out of the exhibit, ignoring the artifacts from the other species, but then stopped as he saw a large, rather busy exhibit filled with tourists. The top was marked, The Regulation Wars. Billy Bob stopped and Emily slowly stepped behind him, trying to take up as little space as possible. "Billy Bob, let's go. I need to see this. It just doesn't make sense to me." He began to walk through the exhibit. There were artwork pieces on either side, the founding of the council, Osh faces, space poodles, fleckos, and some sort of space gerbil, those exosuit cops and the Libertonians. He couldn't help but notice that the Libertonian was cast in the shadows and looked evil. Then there was the massive painting called Betrayal. Libertonians in a strange suit were charging some sort of meeting, shooting the other species, setting fire to the buildings around them. One called The Fall, which showed the Libertonians in the suit falling from the sky and the other species looking heroic, shooting at them. Finally, there was Victory, which showed the other species standing around in two, now suddenly small, bent and subdued Libertonians signing some sort of document. "This tells me nothing," Billy Bob muttered, as even the tourists crowded around the wall-sized paintings. He found a segment past it that actually seemed to have info. He started to read the history presented here. There was a disagreement over the council. The Libertonians thought that they should encourage species to aspire for greatness and remain free to develop them their own. The introduction to the council was to be voluntary and primarily it would work as a trade union, and the alliance to stop the unnecessary wars. The others felt the council should begin to regulate species, making sure that none grew too great or powerful in multiple ways. Those who didn't join the council would be pushed to the side and marginalized, left to stagnate without the galactic economy and its technology. Two started policing their laws as they applied to all species where they saw fit. When the Libertonians disagreed, they moved to leave the council and start their own organization. The rest of the council told them leaving the council was an act of war, and the Libertonians attacked first. The Libertonians struck deep into the various systems and sued for peace early on, but the Jerk Empire convinced the others to keep fighting. After that it became a war of attrition, and the Libertonians were outnumbered very significantly. He read up on the various battles, noting that the council races always lost at least 5 times as many people, and often far more. He also noted the council races would often make and break ceasefires and gain advantages. Yet they didn't engage in total war. They leave infrastructure intact and stay away from the populated centers. It seems Xenos kept industrial zones far away from residential. Galaxy without a concept of total war. Even so, in the end, the Libertonians were defeated. He read the terms of surrender. It seemed like the council took a very heavy-hand approach against the vanquished. They were no longer a council race. Couldn't trade, couldn't travel, and couldn't have a military really. Plus, just one colony off-world from their home planet. He realized why she wore a mask now. Almost no one had seen a live Libertonian in hundreds of years. Then he stepped past and gasped. There, behind the gleaming force field of some sort of tall suit made of metal, wings up and extended his infant flight. It looked like a massive Libertonian. The upper arms ended in claws, while the lower arms had some sort of energy weapons attached to them. The legs ran down into massive metal feet with 4 claws, 3 spread out in the front and 1 at the back. "Is that the exosuit you people used in the war?" "Yes, one of the elite units would wear a suit like this. You fit into it, the sensors adjust the padding inside to your size. The suit was at least 9 feet tall." "It's gorgeous," Billy Bob muttered as he looked up at it. He saw the diagram next to it that showed the Libertonian male. Larger than Emily, but not by very much. It had somewhat larger arms, and the legs ran down and pointed feet, with 4 claws very similar to the suit. The downy feathers ending halfway down the calf and turning into tougher leather-looking skin. But then he noticed their fingers ended in long razor-sharp talons. He looked over Emily and her hands, and she caught him doing this. "We wear gloves to prevent us from stabbing everything that we try to pick up." Then he looked back up at the display, watching the video of a Libertonian in flight. Their large black wings were powerful enough to keep them moving while they used the gossamer dragonfly-like material between the sets of arms to steer and turn. Then he thought it over. Those legs looked more like something that he'd pictured on a dinosaur, like a raptor, and her muzzle was pointed out straight like well, not like anything he knew of offhand, but maybe a gator? Wait, weren't raptors birds? He gasped. The white feathers and the wings had led them astray. They weren't space eagles. They were flying space raptors. Space eagle raptors. Think that this still works? He asked as he pointed to the suit. I mean, in theory they keep artifacts in original format, and the reactor is rated for 1,000 years, so maybe. He was staring at it when they heard some sort of chime and looked around. The tourists and employees began to crowd around the nearest holographic informational terminal, seeming to think something was happening. The map of the museum was replaced by some sort of poodle who looked fancier than usual. Dire and alarming news today. The council is announcing a state of war. There were murmurings of surprise all around. We're getting reports that the Allspace Empire, that one of the primary worlds, has been ruthlessly and savagely attacked. A new species known as the Americans has attacked their planet without any official declaration of war. The Allspace Empire is claiming this attack was unprovoked and completely against all council ethics. The prime matriarch insists that these are mercenaries hired by our old enemies, the Libertonians. They call upon all council races to join in war against the new threat. An emergency session of the council has been called. In the meantime, they advise citizens to be on alert for 2 highly dangerous terrorists. There was a picture that came up of Emily in her mask and suit and Billy Bob, made from security footage. Emily gasped as the tourists around them turned and looked. But as she looked to Billy Bob, he was running over towards the display with the battle suit. He picked up one of the exhibit signs and swung it, smashing it into the field generator on the side. There was an explosion and the device crackled and sputtered. The shield failed as the exosuit cops began to charge Billy Bob. Emily! Get in the suit. We're going to take the gold record and get the frick out. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.